Let's discuss with MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, our Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Dilanian, and someone suing to stop this fund, Norm Eisen, co-founder of Democracy Defenders and publisher of The Contrarian. Kevin, several lawsuits have already been filed over this fund. Now there's proposed legislation there to try to kneecap it. What are the details?
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen Democrats on the House side attempt to try to issue subpoenas for various folks involved. That effort was unsuccessful, given that the House majority is Republicans. But in terms of this legislation that Jamie Raskin rolled out just yesterday, essentially it boils down to this. It would basically bar the existence of this fund when it comes to the use of money to be paid out to individuals. And it would also put strict language into legislation to bar it being sent out to January 6th defendants. Now, will this pass during this Congress? Republican leadership is not likely to put this on the floor. However, Raskin's team is not ruling out the possibility of trying a discharge petition, which is essentially where Republicans can team up with Democrats to go over the heads of the Republican majority that controls the floor. This has happened and worked for Democrats on various other pieces of legislation, most notably, for example, the health care subsidies. However, this takes time. Several weeks until we could actually come to the point where they could start signing on to try to discharge this and force action in the House.
So are Democrats right now alone on this? Any GOP buy-in?
Quite frankly, this whole idea has landed with a bit of a thud here on Capitol Hill. There have certainly been some Republicans that have been outspoken and suggesting they support the idea of a fund, particularly those who believe that they were targeted by the DOJ because their phone records were reviewed around their conduct around January 6, 2021. However, a lot of Republicans have expressed a bit of concern about the idea of this fund. One Republican, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, who represents more of a swing district in Pennsylvania, going so far as to suggest this demonstrates a dramatic backsliding in transparency. Here's more of what he had to say.
So we need to unpack the source of the funding. And that's our question to Todd Blanche is, where is this money coming from? Where is it being pulled from? Because we need to tie it back to an appropriation that passed this House and Senate and figure out what belt and suspenders we had around it and what they can and can't do with it. I don't think it's an appropriate use of money.
Notable place to watch today and in the next 24 hours is the Senate side. They have what is expected to begin as soon as this evening, a so-called vote-a-rama on the reconciliation package, completely unrelated piece of legislation dealing with DHS funding. But there will be a chance for lawmakers to add amendments to that. We know that Democrats are keen to put amendments up for consideration, force votes on blocking this fund. We have seen talk of Republicans even going so far as to at least put some guardrails around how this money would be dispersed. So we could see an attempt by Republicans to put some restrictions on this as early as this evening.
Kevin Fry, thank you. Please keep us posted. Norm, Congressman Raskin points out in his statement, only Congress has the power to appropriate federal dollars. And he adds, we didn't appropriate a cent for the January 6th Millionaire Trust Fund. President Trump, across both terms, has routinely ignored appropriations and funneled money where he wants it to go. So why does it seem like the constitutional constraints on the power of the purse just aren't working?
Anna, as is so often the case with the corruption of the Trump administration, they don't start working until you make them work by going to court. At Democracy Defenders Action and Democracy Defenders Fund, we have over 300 legal matters and cases to enforce the Constitution and laws. And in fact, we're represented, Congressman Raskin and 92 other members of Congress, in filing a legal objection within minutes of this slush fund being announced. Anna, it's an endowment for violent January 6th insurrectionists, including who assaulted the police to get them money. It raises the risk that they'll do it again. Stay tuned, because there will be much more litigation. And that, in turn, our work on the litigation front, in turn, reinforces the pressure that members of the president's own party must feel as they act in Congress to stop this. Like with the Epstein files, it's a grotesque act of corruption. $1.8 billion being stolen from you and me and the American taxpayer totally illegally. And I do think that there will be enforcement of the Constitution and law in the courts and in the legislature.
Ken, I mean, when just to kind of highlight the bizarre nature of all of this, I saw it referred to as a similar situation of a CEO essentially suing his own company and benefiting from that. I wonder what the feeling is like right now inside the DOJ about this arrangement as acting AG Todd Blanche continues to publicly defend this.
Yes, there is increasing astonishment among the people I talk to inside and outside the DOJ about the lengths to which Todd Blanche, the president's former defense attorney, is willing to go to please the president. Law and facts be damned, because he was a federal prosecutor for 9 years. He knows how the Justice Department is supposed to run. He is not like Pam Bondi, who never worked at the DOJ. And so people are really shocked by the things he is saying to defend this. First of all, they say that the premise is a lie. There was no weaponization in the first Trump administration or in the Biden Justice Department. And then secondly, they cannot believe the things he's saying, won't even rule out that this money could go to people who were convicted of assaulting police officers. Take a listen to the latest comments from Blanche last night.
People that hurt police get money all the time. Okay, there's a process where if you believe you have your rights violated, you can apply for funds, you can sue, you can file a claim, you can go to court. In some of those cases, the state, the government, the federal government settles those cases. It's abhorrent to ever touch a law enforcement officer, which is why anytime anybody does that, and it's a federal officer, we'll prosecute them. But that's a completely different question with whether an individual is allowed to apply for a claim.
The people convicted of assaulting police officers on January 6th were convicted by juries in courts presided over by independent federal judges. The Justice Department didn't convict them. Citizens of the United States convicted them. And the idea that they could now get compensation, having been pardoned and let out of prison in many cases, is just mind-boggling to a lot of my sources on it.
Norm, we just heard Blanche there arguing that this is just like a typical procedural step that someone, even a violent offender, could take to get relief from the federal government. But is that a fair comparison?
No, Anna. Through the body of case law, it's known as Bivens case law, the hurdles to recovery are vast. And if you yourself are culpable in wrongdoing, you cannot recover. It's a bald-faced lie. He's acting as he did before becoming the leader of the Department of Justice, before entering the administration, as Donald Trump's defense lawyer, and it's no more competent. He was the lead defense lawyer in the case that led to Trump being convicted 34 times. What is happening here is unheard of in American history. Violent insurrectionists, including those who assaulted cops, were pardoned. And now a $1.8 billion endowment is being set up that they can collect and then use money, creating the risk of them doing it again. No wonder litigation is already moving. There will be much more. The courts will not allow this. Again and again in our over 300 legal cases and matters at the Democracy Defenders Fund in action, the courts have stepped in to stop these kinds of shenanigans. I'm confident they'll do that here with this fund, and also that Congress will break, because the corruption is so outrageous. We've never seen anything like this in American history. American people hate corruption, irrespective of party. Congress, too, will be forced to act.
President Trump addressed this fund yesterday, and he framed himself as a passive participant. Watch.
I released them from the lawsuit, and I guess they made a settlement of some kind. I wasn't involved in the settlement. I could have been involved, but I didn't choose to be. So they made a settlement.
Norm, you were the ethics czar in the Obama White House. If this plan had bubbled up back then with or without the president's input, what would have happened?
Anna, I wouldn't even let President Obama refinance his modest family home because we were in the middle of the Great Recession and he was regulating the banks, and it might look inappropriate. It's so inconceivable, not just that President Obama would be involved in this, but that presidents of any party, any prior occupant of the Oval Office or the presidency, going back to the founding of our nation, would have anything to do with